This is it. This is the start. Welcome.
Welcome.
What are we wearing?
We're again. We're here again.
We are here again.
We haven't got our own merch. Our guest has kindly brought some of their own merch.
They have. Do you know where I see these though?
Where?
All over Education Estates.
Do you?
Every time I see Education Estates, I see these hats. So if anyone hasn't guessed yet who we've got on today, Tim, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Tim.
Can we take this off?
Yeah, you can.
Can we take this off now?
Take it off.
Collector's items, these.
Plug a little promo in.
Well, that's it. I'm keeping that.
I'm keeping it because actually your message is strong. Make academies great again. I love it. That ain't just a Tim Warner thing. That's our whole play of everything.
We've hijacked Mr. Trump's.
Yeah, well, I like it.
Yeah. Made it our own.
I love it.
And who doesn't want to? Who's not going to sign up to want to make academies great again?
No.
Take a brave soul to say, no, not for me.
Tim, thank you for joining us. I'm glad you've made it. It's been a while, to be fair. We asked you quite a while ago to come on, but
months ago.
It was months. But the reason we wanted you on is because of all the great work you do, to be honest, across education. I came across your profile a long time ago, and you were always involved with Education Estates and doing talking and speaking to the right people. And, you caught my attention a long time ago. And we became mutual friends, I think. And so it's lovely to have you on. I hope. I think
we're all friends here. No, and obviously I know Lee from years ago as well.
Yeah.
So it's nice to be together.
It's a nice podcast this today.
It's nice. Normally I don't know the guests, but I do know Tim. So
we all know each other.
Yeah.
We do.
Hopefully it's going to make it easier than usual. So.
But look, with all these podcasts, we want to go right back to the beginning. Your journey into the world of work, depending on how far you want to go back.
Gosh.
But give us your story, Tim, of how you got to where you are today.
So my first degree was in humanities, social policy, etc. Unbelievably not that well marketable. So I ended up having to take myself back to Salford Uni and do a proper degree, building surveying. And I did the tough social housing tour of duty. Decent homes, etc. A really tough gig, whereas first tier contractors are, mobilising at 1% profit margins, and it's a tough gig, especially if you're on the client side. But it was a good grounding, undoubtedly, to be client side. And then later on, my mother-in-law, she actually became one of the very, very first executive heads, and she was an executive head at a federation of schools down in Michael Gove's own constituency, Surrey Heath. And because they were a federation, they had the freehold of the land. And in Surrey, you can imagine the land value there.
Wow.
And so they had a very old school, a dilapidated school, which would make sense if they could get some development for that, planning permission for that, and then they could use the receipts from that, the revenue from that, to build themselves a new school. So I kind of got involved in that. Stone King were the lead solicitors that they went to, and so I just played a minor part, but that was what first introduced me to the sort of academy sector, which is north of 10 years ago, I guess now.
Yeah,
I didn't know that actually. That's a good little bit of history. We'll say history lightly there. Yeah,
it's so 10 years ago. So before that, then, before doing education, working, that was your first kind of rodeo, we'll call it, into education. Before that, it was all social housing for all them years.
I also worked for a company called Acrobat Carbon, and this was during the period of mitigation, where the big six, as were then, energy companies, they were facing fines of just astronomical zeros because they hadn't met their carbon targets by the end of whatever it was, 31st of December, I'm going to say 2012. And then they applied for something called mitigation, which gave them 3 months until the 31st of March. And what that involved in was basically external wall insulation, loft insulation, etc., and trying to move EPCs from, say, an F to a D. And I worked on the broker side of that, whereby ECO and all sorts of funding was available to do the infills after social housing. There would obviously be right to buys. And so we were identifying cities with large numbers of solid wall buildings and literally knocking on every single door and saying to landlords, would you like free wall insulation? It's nothing. And it was quite a challenge trying to do that in brutal Bootle in Liverpool in December of that year because they weren't necessarily believing you. And it got to a tipping point where people were actually coming to us and saying, please, can we have it? But like for a terraced house, a front and back, it was probably about 10 grand's worth of free upgrade. And if you had like a corner house with maybe 3 elevations, it was probably 12, 14 grand. And the idea was that the big 6 would raise the EPC. They get their carbon savings. The landlord would have a upgraded facade, potentially be able to charge more rent going forward, and probably more importantly that the tenant who was watching their money just literally, evaporating through the solid wall and constantly putting money in to try and remain warm, they were a beneficiary as well. I mean, that was a really good experience to sit between the client and the contractor. So I was in the broker bit in the middle there. So I've kind of gone all the way around from client to broker to contractor to consultant side. And it's therefore, as you go through life, you get these different experiences and it affords you that perspective.
Yeah, it builds the... Did you know about all this? All these schemes that were kicking off? It's like, the loft insulation, the wall insulation, and they all started to fail. And then they were like, like the insulation in the wall.
Yeah.
It all started to collapse, and there was there's nothing in it anymore.
No,
and then you've got to go, it was messy. So much funds.
We would, I think, like anything, too much of a good thing, people and contractors got on board, and the check-in and quality levels were just put under duress. Yeah, because of the volume. In reality, we've done a lot of surveys, sort of looking. It sort of became a bit of a PPI claim in reality, in some of them, where there was. Installation issues. There were also just incorrectly spec'd options done as well that weren't ideal. So it's. I was aware of them at the time, but because I wasn't necessarily a homeowner back then, you didn't really, as a tenant, you didn't really take much notice of it, and you thought, it's a bit of old paper in there. Yeah,
I learned all that at Langley, That's because there was social housing.
Exactly.
Social housing. I didn't know about any of it, and we just had this presentation one day of all these funding pots that are coming in year after year, and it was crazy, all the money pumped in. But I guess all this was great for learning about what you can then take on with you into your next journey.
Exactly. I mean, during that period, during the mitigation period, carbon rates were extremely high because obviously, as I say, the big 6 were under all this pressure. The day after so from the 1st of April of that year, the carbon rates dropped from something like £140 a tonne to back to something like £45 a tonne. And all of the industry that had ramped up with the energy assessors, etc., effectively died overnight because no one cared about the carbon value anymore. And it's strange now, 10 years later on, that here I am now. I'm a big proponent of fabric first. For me, I can't, with all, integrity, recommend to my school clients to put in air source heat pumps unless that building envelope is properly insulated. Unless, of course, I was going to be measured on carbon savings. But with a spark gap of 3% of 3 times, for me to recommend electrifying the estate, if the buildings are not insulated, then the school is going to effectively pick up a much higher bill. They might have some carbon savings, but who's paying for that? Yeah. So it always depends on how these things are going to be measured. So it is kind of odd now to be back in the same environment whereby carbon is probably undervalued at the moment.
Yeah. Which then took you into took you nicely into that school world, didn't it? So what was the first year like when you decided to transition into schools? Were you straight in as a consultant and saying, I'm here to try and help, or were you doing other parts within education before you kind of got into the consultant?
I think I was first-blooded for a round of, I think it was the very first year, so it was post-ACMF. It was the first round of SIF. Right. and I've said this to you before, to all of you.
When life was simple. Or simpler.
SIF we're always in competition, let's be honest. We're in competition with other consultants. We really are. However, if you've done a few tours of duty, if you've been in the trenches in SIF, if you've been doing your 14, 16-hour days, it's literally like being back at uni. It's dissertation time. It's literally all-consuming. There is mutual respect in terms of, wading through that and coming through the other side. It was a blooding. There's no doubt about it. But the rewards are phenomenal, aren't they? In terms of the success that school, you can transform that school estate with one SIF. Well, obviously, more than one SIF bid, but just one SIF bid that's successfully awarded will have such a massive impact. And I think experiencing that for the first time, again being relatively successful, meant that you thought, oh, well, I'm doing more of this. This looks like quite a good thing to do.
Sif,
I sort of bad dramatise it. It's a little bit like for the school winning the lottery. In reality, it's sort of like you get your ticket and you go in the draw, and hopefully you've got the best numbers, so to speak. But when you do get that, it must be such a relief and a weight off the shoulders of the schools, because some of them don't have the funding, they don't have the structure to be able to do these bigger projects, like roofing projects. Imagine having your roof leaking for 5, 6, 7 years, and then all of a sudden you've got some funding to stop that leak and all the damage. It must be such a relief for head teachers, for estates managers, all parties. But it's even for the kids and the staff, because they've got to live through it. It's keep patch like anything. But yeah, no, it is that sort of what's the word, that you bask in that glory for them, don't you, a little bit, because you think, oh yeah, we got it for you, yeah.
I remember SIF, my first exposure to SIF was 2017. So that was when I was working at Langley and I was involved with it, and I was like, what's this? Like, they've just been given £500,000 to put a new roof on. And I was like, where's that money come from? I didn't know anything about it. Wasn't my world. But you could see our school was just transformed overnight with this brand new roof and windows and doors, and I'm just like, more of this, please.
Exactly.
I think we all were, weren't we? Like, more of this. But since my time of coming in at 2017, you'll be able to give me maybe the dates, you as well, Lee. It's just declined since then. Like, it's not got better every year, and we've got this shift now, this big shift towards schools moving towards SCA and POTS, and then the POTS getting stretched. But yeah, it really did up. So that was you coming in then, right at the beginning. It was almost like what you said. It was like, boom, let's make schools get better. When did you start seeing it?
In the early days, because there was a lack of competition in terms of eligible academy schools bidding, the uploads of some basic condition surveys were pretty simple compared to what we now go into today in terms of options appraisals and the incredible fierce competition. And as you say, in the heyday, there would be 1,400, 1,500 annual awards. Last year was 866. Yeah. The year before that, just over 1,000. Looking at the announcement yesterday that we're going to have a budget allocation of 470 million for SIF, the announcement in May, unless they specifically fund the lower value contracts, I can't see it being above 900. So we're still 40% off the heyday that you remember when you first kind of came in 2017, etc. There's a long way. We are. It's so well documented, the condition of our estate, and we had hoped under a new Labour government that they would be able to find additional resources to basically really invest in our estate. And unfortunately, looking at yesterday's announcement, we're still some way away from that. SIF gets a lot of bad press. It really, really does. And a lot of people, talk about, well, why don't we just have an SCA, school condition allocation funding, formulaic funding that basically is applied to standalone or small trusts. But if we work on the premise that, a primary school may get 40,000 and maybe a secondary school gets 60,000. Just a minute ago, you talked about £500,000 award. That would take that one school 10 years to save up and not spending any money on anything else, on all of the other ridiculous maintenance issues. So I cannot see how an SCA model could possibly work for trust of a small size. I think I think for good or bad, it's the best system we've got at the moment.
Yeah.
I think, and also, it's not just the pot's decreasing, the demand is increasing. Whereas before, it's sort of like that. It's not like staying there and that's just coming down. It's actually flipping the other way around. I think that's the biggest challenge for them is we look back at the original model through local authorities which is pretty much like SCA funding, and you look at how schools were still in no better shape back then. There were still, I remember at school, leaking roofs and boilers not working, all that. So it's not changing anything. And I think that approach to SIF and academising, that it did give schools opportunity to to try and manage their own estates effectively and have these pots of money to be able to do these bigger items. Like I say, 5, 6 at best years, spending nothing just to get these volumes of money you need to do the big jobs.
Yeah, it is mad. So you both were in at the.
Well, I think Tim was in.
You 10 years
Tim was
ago?
in earlier than me. No, I'd probably said I'm in 6 years, maybe 2007. So but 8 years ago.
Oh yeah,
so
I remember.
17.
I do remember being involved with.
Yeah, Tim's a bit earlier than I was. And to be honest, it's the fields you work in until you get access into those and to see them at first hand. You don't really appreciate what's going on, but as soon as you do, you realise what a challenge it is. And I think the last 8 years, it's a huge shift in how you have to develop the documents and your proposals. And I think I've listened to stories where they've been, the first ones were like 4 pages. It's like a condition document, a costs, a bit of a programme, and that was it, and then some photographs.
Yeah, they were very simple.
And there you go.
Such a long way now. Ours are 150 pages long. I mean, they are detailed, and you still only get a certain percentage of them through.
Correct.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah. It's a high risk, high reward game, and as we've all seen, to be a part of the joy that you get, the emotional head that rings you, sort of saying thank you. We've got this boiler sorted. We're no longer going to have kids sitting in mittens in a cold classroom. It's hard not to absorb that emotion, isn't it? Because it means so much to them.
So just talking about that journey, that obviously the pot was starting to decrease, the demand was going up. You've got to play a different game to show value, haven't you? And like one thing I said at the beginning of this was that you've been really present in a lot of stuff. Every time it's to do with education, you're either there in a talk, on a stage, or doing something. Was that a personal decision to go, actually, rather than just be another kind of consultant, I want to be more of a voice and help change? Just talk about your personal branding journey as well, because that's what it is what you did. And when did you start doing more of it?
So I've been a consultant for other consultants, and understandably, they perhaps would wish to curb my enthusiasm or my emotion in terms of wanting to fight for my clients. When I made the decision to go on my own, that effectively kind of removed the shackles, and I would stand or fall on that. I am obviously in competition with other consultants, and I chose that the way I wanted to differentiate myself and my brand and my offer was to stick my head above the parapet, was to provide a critique on the things that I saw as a qualified surveyor, as someone who writes bids, that I didn't think was right. Lee and I will be advising our clients on how to manage their estate. And we will be applying what we consider the best practice, etc., the correct way to collect data, analyse data and present data. And that seemed to be in sharp relief to how the DfE themselves were collecting data, which, as you know, it's barely a secret, but the CDC 1 and 2 are frankly they're just not worth the paper they're written on. For schools, they apparently provided a rationale for the DfE to go to Treasury and say, this is how much money we need because this is the condition of our estate. But again, that's hardly been terribly successful. They didn't even pick up on RAC, did they? So that's left them with another hole. So just mentioning that there now, you can see that I will have to call out things that I believe were wrong, and I mean genuinely believe them. I would never name an individual, but I think there are flaws in the policy, and I think there have been flaws in the methodology. Not everyone wants to do that. Some people will see the DfE as the hand that feeds, and therefore they don't want to be biting them. And I understand there's a high risk to be undertaken there, but I genuinely believe what I say, and I genuinely believe I would have the empirical evidence to back it up. Yeah. I've spent a lot of time analysing data, especially condition data, and especially where SIF bids were awarded. It was no surprise to anyone that under 14 years of Conservative rule, the analysis shows that that those schools that were in a Conservative constituency did rather well, and certain areas, the North East, Yorkshire and Humber, did traditionally very badly. It may be that we see those things turn around. It's just a question of maybe sometimes, as I say, sticking your head above the parapet, and you're either successful with that or you're not. I just chose to take that risk, and it wouldn't have been fair for me to have taken that risk and exposed perhaps someone else's business to it. For me, I was prepared to do it.
It's a fair point. We speak about, we like branding, don't we? Personal branding, being out there. I put my head above the parapet every day, and and it's almost like sometimes you feel like you're just talking into dead space and no one's listening, and then sometimes you worry that why am I saying the things that I'm saying? I'm almost it's massive. You're exposing yourself, especially when you're aligned with education and schools. It's a really, really difficult thing, but there's a real power in it because I think that it builds trust. It really does build trust. Not everyone challenges the bigger, organisations, whether it's a DFE. No one would even like to do that. So the fact you do that gives you a voice. It creates branding and it feeds back to you. But yeah, was there a point in your career when you went, I'm going to do this? Like, was there a moment where you thought, I need to speak up?
I mean, I'm sure this is going to come as an enormous surprise to anyone that knows me, but I've always had a big mouth.
Yeah.
I've always been quite loud and I've always been quite emotional. And I've found it difficult. I'm a bit of an open book. And that, as I say, that cuts both ways, doesn't it? No, I don't think I ever made a conscious decision. I think this is just who I am. Yeah. But you've not always got the freedom to be who you are, have you? Let's be honest.
No, you haven't. And that's fair. We spoke a lot about branding, haven't we, and stuff. And you've spoke a little bit about... Well, to be honest, doing this, when I said to Lee, do you want to do a podcast? He thought, yeah, go on then. And actually,
I said you were mental first.
It's working wonders. Yeah. I do. And
do you know, it's nice to step out of your comfort zone. Like I said, it's believe it or not, in my teenage years, I was quite comfortable up on stage or doing something like that, but then you sort of get into work life, and I don't know if it's the industry we're in surveying. It's quite a bit of a introvert sort of personality. We're like, let's can't do that. Let's stick to what we know and do this. Whereas it is quite nice to be, and it's come on, Lee, what's the word? It's nice to be able to have a voice.
Be a human.
Be a human.
Be human.
But actually have a professional integrity as well to be able to put your voice forward, not just banging the drum because you feel you've got to. It's like I said, Tim's data is probably unimaginable from my perspective because he does spend a lot of time into that. So, and you've got yourself to that point where you can make those decisions because of informed decisions, because you've looked at the data and things like that. Whereas like sometimes it's just like people shouting and this because it's not my way, it's not the right way. But it's nice. It's definitely nice to be able to.
And we don't see it enough. I obviously I speak very independently, and with this, surveying practices, especially building consultants, and we spoke about this. It's always about take, it is, and that isn't to say that we just take. We're there to offer a service, which is the services to offer skill, but it's all about take. You don't see enough people going, well, hang on a minute, I'm going to come stand on your side of the fence, I'm going to fight for you, and let's go win it together. And but then no one wants to speak up in case they damage their reputation, because at the end of the day, surveying practices, especially consultants, they've got a professional body. You don't want to say something that could damage your entire reputation. And I just love like the way that you've kind of gone about it and go, well, I might as well speak because nobody else is.
It's what we're doing now. It's about communicating, isn't it?
Yeah.
It really is, and the power of communication.
I think it's beyond just surveying as well. Just
not calling out surveyors, by the way.
Yeah, it's sort of like, but it's like architects, engineers, all the professional design team that gets involved in these sort of things.
I think that's the most controversial thing I've ever said on this podcast.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, they're going to come
digging
for
us
me
out.
Now. They're going to come for me now.
You were.
Sorry, Tim.
But it is about it. When I consider that I again sit between my client and I sit between my pre-qualified supply chain partners. I never ever look at my my supply chain as anything other than partners. They're not there to be used. They are there to support. And therefore, when we're preparing a bid, it is about the partnership and the collaboration between client, myself, and the contractors to work together to get the outcome that we all really want. i.e. to be successful. And you have to communicate in all of that. You know, there is certain information that I need the client to provide. And I'd want them to make sure that they paid the contractor, for example, on time. And likewise, I'll be expecting the contractor to perform to a level that my client can expect. And it's about how you broker that, and it's about how you communicate that. And it's definitely about, you know, getting everyone on board. It's funny that you should say about, you know, bringing in extras, if you like, with the new Procurement Act, which I actually, I know we're going to have to get used to this, but I actually think there are some positives that certainly could come from that. The move away from most economic advantageous tender to most advantageous tender, to go from meet to mat, is potentially a really exciting and a good opportunity for our clients to take a more sophisticated approach to procurement and tendering, because we kind of need to move away from just measuring on the lowest price. We need to be encouraging value. And if that means that the CapEx is slightly higher, but can be offset by OpEx, by savings, then that's exactly what we should be advising our clients to do. And I'm hopeful that they will now have greater freedom to be able to exercise that. And what you were alluding to earlier on, the idea of bringing in social value.
Yeah.
And how important that will be. We will be in a position I will be asking my contractors what they can do.
Yeah.
He's jumped in there because that was my next question.
Well,
moving on to procurement.
Went into it lovely, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's a great
Didn't need to
thing.
say anything.
What I want to understand is, because you might be able to give it, you've read into it. I've seen a few people talk about it. I want it to be explained like I don't know anything.
Pretty simple.
Very simple terms. And because and this is what I want this podcast is about. You know, we get a lot of just general public watching, and sometimes they're so disconnected from it, no one's bothered. But actually, what was it? What's been the changes, and what does that look like in good and bad? Let's just throw it all under the bus. But what's the good and the bad in this situation?
Genuinely, I think what I've just said, the fact that you can move away from just economically advantageous to advantageous, affords the client to be able to, when they draw up their list of how they want to evaluate a submission, they don't have to just look at the bottom line. They can look at what other value, and I mean value, not cost and price here, what other value that competing contractors can bring to the party. And that will afford them, hopefully, a better product, shall we say.
Yeah.
If they can get it for a marginally smaller or marginally higher price, but the value extends the life cycle, for example, or tick some sustainability boxes, or we get some social value out of it, they should be afforded that luxury. Genuinely, it's not a massive change. It really isn't. I think in theory, in terms of public sector, the new Procurement Act, but in terms of how that kind of cascades into our education sector, then the very much could be a lot of changes. SIF is not really a traditional procurement route. It's more of a tendering route, isn't it? There's no traditionally, if you were marking a number of submissions, you would have transparent weighted numbers against it, so that Lee would know if health and safety was going to carry 1 mark or 15 marks. He would build his bids to answer that question. You know, if it's 15 marks, he's going to spend a lot more time.
It's manipulated to get it.
And also, if you are unsuccessful, you get to know where you were weaker than your competitors. So they scored 76, you scored 72. Well, where was the 4%? What can you learn that your competitor did better? We never have that feedback. The feedback that we get again out of SIF is highly questionable, but it's not transparent, and it's not what we would deem as traditional procurement feedback. So I think it's going to be interesting how it cascades and how it filters down into our little niche sector. Schools going forward, now, it was always likely that under a new Labour government there was always going to be greater scrutiny on value for money, and I think that's clearly falling into place now. The Procurement Act was already going to run regardless of who won. So I think that schools going forward, as you know, are now charged with undertaking even more extensive due diligence, not just on the services that Lee and I offer, but also how we have procured those services, which contractors we've invited to the party to tender. They now are charged with not just entrusting us to do that, they actually have to almost be consulted, or at least we need to provide a rationale as to why we've chosen these particular contractors. Yeah. So it's going to add extra burden. We've talked about, how the caretaker has all of a sudden got to run a biomass boiler or a BMS system. And now the poor Swine has got to sort of start adding in procurement and due diligence into his role. It's going to be a tough gig for schools going forward. It really is.
It's difficult though, isn't it? Because it's how often have you been in a position where we're doing a SIF proposal or bid or you want a submission that's quite involved, could be a new heating system or that, and you get to a point where you've got a proposal from a school to say, oh, can we go to Joe Bloggs, plumber or joiner or something, and you feel bad to sort of turn around and say, well, no, they're not suitable. But at the same time, they've got ultimate power to be able to propose that, and it's.
So Lee, that's a really good point. And again, when I talked about procurement and we talked about social value, one of the obvious things would be to make sure that local SMEs were aware or invited to bid for that work. And I think in theory, who would again object to that? But in the reality, the reason that I tend to not wish to extend my supply chain too far is because I have pretty good control over the contractors that I've worked with. I know what they're capable of, and I particularly undertake PQQs to understand how solvent they are. Yeah. So I think the classic example I always get when I get a school that says they want to nominate a local contractor is, okay, fine, they're going to have to pass my PQQ first, for one. Second, it'll be kind of your risk that you're taking them on. I've been in situations where over the summer, because obviously that's when we do most of our work for schools, if, for example, the trust's governance policy required 2 signatories on, say, a £200,000 interim payment, if those 2 signatories are not available, understandably one's on holiday. It's the best time of the year that they have. If you had the nominated contractor from down the road, if he's not paid for a month, I can guarantee you he'll be downing his tools, and therefore that project will stop, and that project will not start again until such time as they're paid. Given the DfE's one single deadline date per month for that interim payment request and payment certificate to be issued, if you miss that, then it's the contractor that holds the risk on that. Therefore, if you work with contractors who are who have got the depth of pocket, that if they miss a payment, they are not going to down tools. They will man up. They will continue to finish the program, and it may be that they bankroll the job, but the job doesn't stop. So. Whilst it sounds great to nominate someone around the corner, have they got the depth of pocket to be able to withstand any payment issues? That's the challenge I would throw back.
It's definitely. I'm in agreement with that. You try to utilise all your procedure to try and get the right contractor for the job, and like I say, it's still competitively tendered, but it's the curveball sometimes that you feel like you are sort of victimising the smaller companies that probably can offer a good service, but it's the risk to them. We can't. You look at most paint and decorators or tradesmen; they're getting paid weekly, every Friday, and things like that. And it's like if they miss a payment that's 60 days, that's nearly 6 weeks of pay that then they're having to fund. And this is it's one challenge we find at the time. We're not being obstructive, or we're just trying to be realistic to this. We know what the process is like.
Ultimately, we are protecting the client here. Because although the client's wish may be to have had them in, if that job stops because they haven't paid them, the client's going to have egg on face. It's not going to be great when the kids return in September if the job's half done. We are making that executive decision because we come from that experience. That is our core competency. It's not the schools.
That's what we're getting paid to do.
Exactly.
In reality,
it's all protecting. So you almost create then with obviously all the new Procurement Act, and it's all good, isn't it? It's positive.
Yes, I think
it's
so.
Positive. But it has, we spoke about this, didn't we? Every action creates a reaction, and it's that reaction now that we've not felt yet that we might feel. So all of a sudden there's all this new emphasis on these estate managers to be clued up on what the social value means for them, because at the moment social value for years has been a tick box exercise, as much as it just has. There's been great examples, but there's been poor ones as well. Tick 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 tick. Well, we'll do that, we'll plant a tree, we'll do this, we'll do that. It's awful, and then that tree that they planted is now dead or being dug up. So it has no effect. But they are very strict now, aren't they, on actually how they are, how they can show it and demonstrate that it's working. But the estate managers have to be in line with that, because if they're not, the social value will just go out the window quite quickly. So we've spoken about this, haven't we, is upskilling estate managers, because that's something that we were looking at potentially. The best examples we had is these estate managers that have come from being caretakers. They've come off different jobs before. One of them was a taxi driver, I think, and was just like, oh, now I'm running 9 schools. But there's no official course or anything that we are aware of, you might be able to educate me on this, of moving into estate management. You're almost given general estate management experience and go and learn on the job while taking CPD to get better. Is that where we're at?
I think so as well. I mean, back before Institute for School Business Leaders, there was the National Association of School Business Managers, and I'll never forget. And again, this goes right back to the day. I remember seeing a job spec, and you'd have needed to have lived about 5 lives to have ticked it all off. There was about 56 items. It was the most intimidating list you've ever seen, because how can they be spread across catering, estate management, accountancy? All of it? It's just ridiculous, isn't it? And that's, as you say, is now filtered down to the poor estate manager. He's got a heck of a job on, hasn't he?
Yeah, that sounds like our co-host job description. Really, got to know everything.
Yeah,
got to know everything.
Got to know everything. It is though, and it's something. That's the thing. That's the part that we're going to have to deal with, and you're almost relying on the supply chain to support the end user, but making sure they stick to all what they're saying they're going to do. Social value is a real tricky one, because there's some amazing companies that do it very well.
Yeah, agreed.
But then we have this disconnect between the SMEs that don't even touch social value.
No.
They don't even know what it is.
No.
They're like, oh yeah, he's doing an apprenticeship, but they don't know how that links in or how that can support. We were almost going to create a disconnect between the ones that have got social value elements in and know how to do it properly, and these that actually are thinking, for us to go win schoolwork, we're going to need to bring social value elements in.
I think differently. I think from what I've read into it, I think the new Procurement Act, it's sort of trying to level the playing field a little bit, where the big boys and girls, will say, in the industry, in the sector, they've got all these in place because they've got the funding, they've got all the experience and expertise to do that. But it's isolating the smaller companies. But we shouldn't be penalised that we're not. I'm saying me, I'm as a small SME, so we shouldn't be penalised to say that we can't have a go at something, because I might have a really good view on adding social value.
But you've never had to, but
we've never had to do it, or because we haven't. It's normally, you've been through the tender process. It's like you'll get 9 things, and the 10th thing is, what's your turnover? Is it X? And you're like, no, it's nowhere near that, and it just sort of isolates. So, and I might have had 100% hit rate on the 9 things, but actually that 10th time, I know that's generally across most tender procedures, but it's nice that they've taken consideration into being able to offer that sort of spreading small, medium, large projects and opportunities, as long as you're hitting the set criteria. So it'll be interesting to see how it works when it actually.
That's fair. I actually take it back now. Actually, you're right. It's giving opportunity, because before it'd be saying, right, you need to put 100 apprentices on this job, which isolates everybody. And actually, the information we got was it's value to social value, isn't it? It's not how much social value you can offer, it's the value of the job. So if someone's doing a 10 grand job, if you're putting something in, you could actually still win the job based on how much social value are coming in. So I get that.
For sure, exactly. And obviously, you're not, bearing in mind that the average contract duration's, 6-8 weeks. It's not going to be enough time for an apprentice.
No, it's not.
Not at all. No. So you're going to have to look at other options. So for me, the obvious thing that I'm exploring, for example, is taking a percentage from the contract value and ensuring that the contractor invests in some sort of sustainability issue, something that the school can't afford themselves but would really benefit from. So there's a direct link there for me. I'm going to interpret social value as much as I can in terms of sustainability. It's not going to be. The apprenticeship offer is just not going to work in our sector because, as I say, because the duration of the project. But we can be innovative.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it everyone in the supply chain, by the way?
Innovation, doesn't it?
Is it everyone? Consultants, contractors, everybody?
It will be in terms of the contract value. there should be a percentage that is basically taken back out from the contractor.
Right, so that'll be
back into the school,
you guys
back into that.
But
something that's going to work for the school.
Yeah.
So you've got this new mission then, haven't you, to go, right, how are we actually bringing the social value back in?
Exactly.
I suppose it encapsulates everybody.
Yeah.
So to speak. Is that right? Is that right?
I would prefer to be saying to my contractor, this is what I expect. This is your narrow window of what I want from you, rather than allowing them to come up
pick
with something.
Pick and choose,
you know what I mean? So to that extent, I think it will involve us. Yeah. For sure. But also, at the moment, after the CMA investigation last year and the guidance, which obviously came out in October, the DfE are clearly charging schools with, as I said earlier on, undertaking due diligence on the appointment of consultants, etc. At the moment, it's not been crystallised and it's not been prescribed. So schools are interpreting what does due diligence mean to us. And so at the moment, I receive ITTs all the time from schools where they've cut and pasted something from somewhere. They don't provide a transparency in terms of weightings, etc. And one of the things that concerns me most is how much, when they're evaluating which consultant to go to, whether they're going to be just looking at the bottom line. If a consultant's going to go in at 7.5%, for example.
Is it the tick box?
And so if they are attracted to the lowest price, I would suggest that they're probably going to miss out on the quality. And again, I'll keep going back to the fact that I want them to be encouraged to look for value and not cost. Because if it's a race to the bottom, it's gonna only favour the big boys that effectively will be using undergraduates to go and do that work, to bloody them, and able to charge a lower percentage. Whereas us, those that are built on quality over quantity, we would be penalised. So it's going to be a bit of an interesting few months, I think.
It's making me. It is really interesting because the consultant side now, there's almost a real. You can't just be that middle piece. You're almost having to. I know that happens anyway. You'll talk about the value, but it's all the middle pieces there. You've always got to sit down and go.
It's funny, isn't it? We still receive them now, inquiries, and it's generally the breakdown of
fees.
The marking is 20% sort of mission or company based, 80% fee scale.
Yeah,
and it's just sort of like. Come on, what is that just thrown in just to sort of wet the whistle, or is there any how much weight is that pulling? Not a lot on the numerical.
Because social housing sector is so much more experienced and therefore sophisticated. It'll often be a 40-60, won't it? It'll be 40% cost and 60% quality. Because this is new stuff, new territory for the education sector. I just want to make sure that they understand that there is a big qualitative issue to have there as well, and not just race to the bottom. Because otherwise they will not get the level of service that as we know how hard it is to get a bid through. It's got to be a quality, a robust bid. That does unfortunately come with a cost and a price itself. Yeah. Otherwise, you're just going to be in a volume game where people are just simply going to submit the same template year in, year out, because they're only going to be charging a small percentage. There needs to be a more sophisticated approach, and hopefully that's what I'm saying at the beginning of the act. By saying it's not just economic, it is advantageous. They will take a value perspective.
Yeah, it's educating a set of individuals that have just constantly looked at value for the last decades.
Yeah.
So it's going to be an interesting shift, isn't it? But then it falls back on, like you said there, that sort of education for estates people in that world. How should it be something led by the DfE to be able to say, well,
the DfE, as you know, hitherto have been very reluctant to produce compliant templates for things. They have definitely pushed the risk onto everyone else. The trust. Yeah. Okay, bearing in mind that something like 100 successful awarded SIF bids were taken off academy schools last summer. They were done, as far as we understand, the schools themselves were not found to have colluded in any way. It was due to what they've called what was their exact phrase? I can't remember now. Issues over procurement or whatever. And effectively, the DfE have blamed the schools for that. And yet the school would have commissioned us to undertake that. But they're now saying, I'm sorry, but once the accounting officer signs that bid off, you are responsible. So where does their due diligence end?
Yeah.
It's a really tough question. So I think for us to give comfort to schools to be able to trust our processes, they're going to have greater transparency. And that kind of goes back to what you two have both just said. How do we educate our clients as to what to look for?
We can't just be a facilitator anymore in the middle. It's almost been the person that leads and talks them through it 1v1, and that's where a lot more pressure will come into that. You know, the ones that are doing that work will be the ones that stand out rather than the ones that are just, you know, churn them through all day long. The ones that are actually making the relationships are the ones that.
So last year, genuinely, after what had happened, we spent an hour on every single bid, going through the accounting officer. People I've never met. They've never been part of the estate's journey or the bid journey. Right. But before that person was comfortable to sign off a SIF bid, we took them through every page, and that was subject to the number of bids that I wrote. A considerable amount of time, especially at that end of the season, in terms of when you're getting bids in. However, when I came to solicit testimonials afterwards, I had some of the most heartfelt testimonials of all time, because they had been communicated with, they had been given the platform to go through every last line and were comfortable submitting that bid. And it really did cement that relationship. Genuinely, it was at the time I was thinking, oh, this is all I need now, really.
Yeah.
But in hindsight, it was actually a really good process to go through, because you win trust. It's all about trust. It's all about being authentic, them seeing exactly what you're putting in there. They're no longer exposed for stuff when they go, well, I didn't see that, or I wasn't aware of that. You now have to be that squeaky clean. You've got to have them on board. So therefore, against what you just said, to be able to afford that additional time to spend to go through, you really shouldn't be looking at a quantity model, because you're going to have, especially some of the big boys, that'll take them 100 hours of doing that. Well, good luck in the last week of SIF to have 100 hours where you can dedicate.
So it was probably the earliest we'd been this year in submitting the submitting bids with the schools, and it was like we took the same view as yourself, as in we had to make sure that they were well versed. It wasn't just like, here's the bid, get uploaded. It's like, here's the bid, in good time, we've got set hours, we're going to give you a Teams call for a set time to run through anything that you're unsure of, anything. And do you know what? I think maybe 10% there was any queries. Yeah. They still accepted it and just, clear as day, we know what's going on there.
But it's that level of care that is now going to be a prerequisite.
Yeah, we need to be early. There's no lastminute.com and I suppose this reflects back on when you get the calls in December, end of November, saying, can you look at this for us? The answer's no.
Yeah, exactly.
It's risk, isn't it? Then it's risk,
huge risk. And Thames, as we are saying, well, there isn't enough time to be able to do a suitable bid, and something that you've got to put your name to. So it's sort of educating a little bit. It's really hard, because there's potentially a project there, and we're missing out. It's a very
early engagement. So if we were talking to your estate managers now, early engagement. So I've done probably 10 SIF surveys. I kick the tyres. Wow. Do I believe that there's going to be some ready to go? Early engagement, getting the surveys done as quickly as possible. So that they have a cost plan, so they can understand potentially what their financial involvement contribution would be. The sooner you clear that, the better. It definitely pays to do that. And so it also affords all of the parties, whether it's the site manager, the school business manager, the CFO, the board, all of those parties that play a role in that sign-off for that SIF bid, the earlier you can engage them, the less stressed they're going to be, and the better quality the bid will be. So going back to what you said about how do you educate them, it's not going to come from the DFE. The DFE will provide sort of pretty staid best practice, bringing that alive, communicating that on the ground is the role of people like yourselves.
Yeah. Do you know what's interesting about all this is our sessions that we've been having with estate managers, a lot of on sustainability and things like that, and all of them are having a bit of a meltdown that this whole sustainability lead that they need to nominate for next year, they know it's going to fall on them. No one else is picking it up. You know, the CEOs, the business managers, and they're all looking at these states teams. Actually, what the new Procurement Act will actually do will probably fix a lot of this for them, because actually within the bids, they can start tagging things in automatically. So they're naturally doing their sustainability role without thinking about it.
Yep.
So I think that's a massive plus, because I didn't, you didn't know what this was going to be. But before, it was like, we've got this new block that we need to be good at. But now, if we follow the Procurement Act as it's been set out, they're going to get solar panels probably on the roof. They're going to get biodiversity setups in the school. They're going to get better. And I just think naturally, if they're following that properly and being stringent with everything, they will naturally pull the sustainability along with it, I think.
It'll be part of the journey for sure, because it needs to be a consideration. When I if we do a heating bid, we have, do nothing. We have full electrical. We have hybrid, and we have like for like. And I have to justify which one I recommend. Mm-hmm. Very unlikely I'll be recommending do nothing. Very unlikely I'll be, unfortunately, recommending full electrical, because they won't have the electrical infrastructure inside the school.
Yep.
Let alone whether the DNO needs to have been copied in, and whether the substation, because that's going to put another $100,000 on it. So it's suddenly going to no longer be, feasible. It's effectively going to come down to like for like. Subject to existing electrical infrastructure, or a hybrid, and that's helping them go through their job. So at least if they do go like for like, which is an awful thing to be doing, because if we put a gas boiler in today, that's going to be there until the last decade of when we're going into 2050. Who our successors or their successors are going to have less than a decade to try and decarbonise their estate. So we really owe a duty of care to try as much as we can to make some sort of step towards transition now. But it's got to stack up. It's all very well us saying that in theory it would be the right thing to do, but if a like for like system's $800,000 and a hybrid's $1 million, or full electrical's $2 million, it's pretty obvious which way it's going, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's very much it's not there yet. I think even when you look at the domestic sort of levels of sustainable energy, it's still not fully there.
No,
even with the initiatives and investment from the government, it doesn't stack up yet.
No, and one of the things that we most hoped would happen under the new Labour government was that schools would be deemed not just social infrastructure but critical infrastructure. If schools had qualified as critical infrastructure, then there would have been a great opportunity for them to have invested in the grid and in our schools. While we're on the second tier, they're not going to use that money as an investment, basically. So, as you say, until the grid's up to speed, until they've basically put in sufficient infrastructure for us to even be able to tap into an electrical system, but we're just going to carry on putting more and more gas in, aren't we?
Yes.
We're going to definitely see a big shift as well. Obviously, we've got falling pupil numbers, which is causing a massive knock-on effect while we're trying to get estates right, the new Procurement Act. But just talk to me about just this tagline here, Make Academies Great Again. What's that mean to you? Like, what's the overall message there? I know it's to make them great, but what's your perfect scenario?
I mean, I just will always, while I'm still in this sector, and I will always see, I only work in this sector. So until such time as I retire, I will always just try and make the case that, I don't want to be arm wrestling people that are arguing for or lobbying for money to go into a health sector. They are equally as needy as we are. And of course, there's roads, there's transport, there's prisons. There's so many demands that are placed on government in terms of requirement for investment. But for me, I'm here to just constantly make the case for schools. That's my role. That's all I will ever do. I'm not demeaning the need for other sectors, but for me, I just surely if there's one thing we should invest in, it's that we've all got as children, and it's also our future. Having our children developed and trained to be able to make our economy great again, then surely part of that journey is to make sure that our schools are fit for purpose. And we've already discussed the joy that we see on teachers' faces when they have actually got a fit for purpose school environment. And our currently our environment is not fit for purpose. It's not going to bring the best out. It's not going to afford opportunities that children should be afforded to be able to be the people that they want to be. So for me, that's my cause.
I love
that's what
that.
I'm going to chase
I
after.
do love it. I love the purpose, the mission. I do. It's so much bigger than just doing like the day-to-day. So yeah, it's been great. I've really enjoyed this. Time's flown. I could talk forever, but we're going to have to end it.
It's been intense.
It has been intense. It's been lovely.
It's good to see you guys. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm sorry it's taken so long to get here. We're all flat out in the school sector, funnily enough. But it's been a real pleasure, and I wish you every success. And I know you're doing some really good things behind the scenes as well.
Thank you.
Congratulations on everything you've done.
Appreciate it. Really do. Thank you so much.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.